Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar for the year. Even though it's the 1st of February, I'm calling this our January webinar because we've got an internal thing. We're gonna hit one webinar a month this year. I think we came really close last year. And joining me today is Shikar, who's one of our metadata analysts here. I think this is your first webinar.
Yes,
Are you prepared?
I'm excited. I'm prepared.
Is everybody else prepared? Can somebody throw me a thumbs up? Can everybody hear us correctly? Yep, fantastic. I love audience interaction. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Throw the thumbs up. I really like them. They make this a lot more interesting. And also pop your questions in the chat because we will be doing a Q&A this afternoon. But I think we've got quite a few people already online and registered. So I think we're going to kick off because we've got a lot to talk about. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different things. And up front, I'm going to be talking about like a really big thing that we worked on last year. It was about a 3 or 4 month process, and that was our IRAP assessment. So Aristotle's actually been IRAP assessed, and we're going to be putting out a lot of information about that over the next couple of weeks. But we want to talk about what that is because we went into it, a little bit confused. It was a really big exercise for us, and we wanted to know what it actually meant. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what is IRAP, and then Shikar.
Yeah, and then we'll be talking some points about data inventory. We'll be presenting a demo featuring how to do data inventory, why we do that, why do we need to do that, how to do bulk uploads, and then how we can securely publish our inventories to right audience.
So basically everything that we're going to be talking through today is really just about data security and what can we do in our organization. So I'll be talking a little bit up front for about 15 minutes talking through the IRAP, and then we'll be doing a little demo. Then we'll be doing that Q&A with, I know we've got a couple of people who are already Aristotle clients, so lots of Q&A about how this impacts you. But we're going to get started with unpacking this acronym. So the first thing that I wanted to talk through is just what is IRAP? Because I think a lot of people ask that question, especially like this is really tailored for the Australian government. We know this idea of IRAP assessed, and it's this really important thing that we want to do. And basically, it's actually quite straightforward. It was a little bit easier than we expected. IRAP is the Independent Registered Assessors Program, and it really tells you everything that it is in the name. So it's all about getting independent third parties to assess programs, to assess platforms, to assess products, and to assess organizations. And that's based on the Information Security Manual. So I'm not going to read 100 or 800 something controls and all of these different checks and balances around it. But what it's really around is it's around a set of controls that have been defined by the Australian Cybersecurity Centre that tell us how to, securely manage our information in the Australian government context. Now, as you know, Aristotle is Australian-based, we're Canberra-based, but we are operating internationally, and it has a lot of impact on international controls as well, like our SOC compliance or international security standards like ISO 27K as well. So there's a lot of information in there around how we manage our data effectively. One thing that was really important for us was also noting that it's not actually a requirement for anybody to have to get IRAP assessed. So this was a big question that we had as well is, is it necessary in all cases? And a lot of the time you can actually, you can go to the Information Security Manual that's provided by the ACSC, download it, and you can start assessing your own platforms yourself. So you can actually start doing that assessment and that review before you do anything else.
I wanted to ask a few questions, Sam.
Sure.
Do you think government agencies needs to be IRAP assessed?
I think it comes down to requirements. And I think, we'll be talking through some of those steps, but I think one of the reasons why it's important is it kind of shortcuts the process. So when you can say that you've had an IRAP assessment, you can really shortcut a lot of that. So you don't need everybody to go through 800 something controls. So it really is a case dependent kind of situation.
Okay. And how do I know that an organization is IRAP assessed?
I mean,
like as an audience or as a user of a platform, how do I know that it's IRAP assessed?
I mean, you kind of Google it.
Okay.
So this is a really easy one. You tell the world, like if somebody's IRAP assessed, you start a webinar and you tell the world and you say, we're IRAP assessed. It's actually a really big thing for a lot of organizations to communicate outwards as well. And we did this with a lot of our upstream vendors. It was one of the things that we had to look at, was making sure that the people that we were working with as well were able to meet these compliance requirements. And a lot of the time you Google, Aristotle IRAP, you'll find results. You Google the things that you're looking at and you'll find information there.
That's good to know. And what difference do you think does it make after you get IRAP assessed? For example, Aristotle was not IRAP assessed before, but now it is. What difference did it make?
Well, I was a little bit more stressed and my beard went a little bit grayer. But I think it's also around making sure that you have an independent assessment. So, one of the things that we said going into this was, I believe really strongly in our security culture and everybody did a really fantastic job. But it's having that independent view of having somebody else come into to us. And they did a lot of interviews. There was a big interview component and saying, is this organization actually doing what they set out to achieve?
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Were there any other questions?
Maybe, yeah, this one. I wanted to ask, some people say that IRAP is technical. What are your thoughts on that?
No. So we actually prepared that question in advance. One of the biggest surprises for us when we did this was how it's not just around how we manage our data. It's also about all the ways that we come together from a cultural and an organizational perspective. So it was really looking at, what not only from a technical perspective, how are we securing the data, but what are we doing on a daily basis? What are we doing to make sure that we're continuing to treat this information securely? What as a culture are we doing around training? What are we doing around physically securing it? And I think we'll talk about that in a second as well. And also, what are we doing to make sure that we know that we can trust the people we're working with as well?
Cool, that's good to know.
So one of the examples that I want to use here is just to kind of show you the level of depth. We're not going to go through all 800 controls. There's two sections that I wanted to talk through. And I wanted to show this as an example. So this is a top secret salmon. And it shows how much depth this goes into. So one of the controls that we had to look at and assess ourselves against was, are devices that are trying to connect to top secret government networks using the right colored cables to connect them. Now, obviously, we don't handle top secret data and we're not, spies or anything like that. So we didn't have to actually go through those checks. So there was a number of checks where we could immediately, exclude ourselves from. So the idea is, again, the guidance kind of gives you this understanding of what you need to do and what you don't need to do as well. A more accurate example beyond our top secret salmon pink colored cables that connect our secret computers together was actually one around database systems. And this is one that I found really interesting and kind of leads into the rest of the talk, is one of the IRAP controls, or a couple of the IRAP controls, was specifically focused around having a register of databases or having an inventory of databases so that you could reliably say, where is your data and what is it being used for? We've seen there's a lot of work out there in the external environment where, we've got people like the ONDC who are talking about good practice and best practice. I think this is another avenue for us to discuss when it comes to management of data, is for us to maintain these security compliances, not just for IRAP, but also for our other international security standards. One of the questions we have to answer is, where is our data and what's in there? And these are the traditional questions that we at Aristotle really like to answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand back to Shikar and I'm going to say, so when we went through this process, we actually had to bring about a collection of our own data internally. What were the things that you saw when we went about this process?
I remember last year we wrote heaps of documents for IRAP assessment, and some of them were technical, some of them were talking about physical things like CDs or USB used in the organization for client data transfer, and some of them were talking about cultural aspects, how do we train Aristotle staff that you have to make sure that security measures are in place, and how do we make sure every register is being recorded. So to focus on one, I'll talk about the data register here. I remember one of the clients request us for some data access and some data reports. So we created one register with a few columns, let's say who asked for it, when was it asked, what was the rationale behind it, and till what time we gave them the access. So everything was recorded in a data register. But like at the same time, how the IRAP assessor knows that we are following that, and how do we want to share that knowledge with IRAP assessor? We can't share our data because it's private, but at the same time, we want to make sure that IRAP assessor is aware that we are doing it everything accurately. So this is where it comes to data inventories. We can create data inventories in the registry where like the assessor can have the information. We can create metadata. Still the data will be private, but he'll know like what exactly we are storing in that register. And that's how we can make sure that everything is at its place.
Yeah, like, and that was the thing that we found is like one of the biggest things we saw was a lot of the controls that we saw were around events, they were around access, they were around locations of data and information. And again, we saw that common thread of, we understand that there is sensitivity around this data. How do we make it available to users without actually giving them some of that sensitive information? Like, what are the controls we can put around that? So that was a really big component there of just making sure that we were giving out the right information to the right people in the right ways, and leveraging our own tools to share that metadata and those inventories with people.
Yep.
And I guess like this again talks about why data inventories are so important just from an information security perspective. Like one of the things that we see time and time again is the ability for users to have a central location and understand where their data is being captured, where their data is being processed. The idea of that data inventory effectively gives us that listing, that telephone book of assets to say, where is our data being used? Where is it being stored? One of the things that we didn't do is we didn't centralize all of that. So we had a centralized data inventory, but all of our data remained in the systems that it needed to. So again, when we were starting to talk about information security internally, we needed to answer questions like, where is our client data? Well, our client data exists in our protected cloud. Our staff data exists within our payroll and our HR systems, and our access information exists in our audit tracking systems independently. Each of those systems was doing the job they were designed for, but what it meant that we could have that centralized register to point off to where that data is. One of the other things was that it encouraged that continuous capture. So one of the big parts of IRAP is around what are we doing, not just a one-off event, but also from a continuous process. Having that data inventory gives us a way to look internally and go, is this where our data still exists? Are we still capturing the right information? So the idea is that it becomes a big part of that security culture by making sure we know, again, where is our data, who's accessing it, why is it being used, and how is it being used for generating value for the organization. Probably one question that I've got is like back to Shikha. You know what, I'm going to say it. I made it this far in. It feels very, very infomercially, but I love the infomercial stuff. So what do we do to make sure that we can actually begin capturing a data inventory? How do we start that process, and how do we get the rest of the organization involved and making sure that they're part of that ongoing journey?
To begin capturing data inventory, there are actually a lot of resources available. So like a few good of them are like Open Data Institute, let's say. So it's an organization that provides standards and guidance for metadata documentation and metadata management. But like, what if like you are not aware of like what are the standards? Then you can go to ONDC, which is kind of like Office of National Data Commissioner. So it's an organization that provides standard data inventory that is comparable across all the government departments. And there are like preset of 26 metadata attributes that helps you to know like what data you can start to document. You don't have to like add all the information about all the 26 attributes at once. You can just start with name and definition, but it's a good start. And then going forward, there is MAST methodology. MAST stands for Metadata Analyst Standard Teamwork. It's a framework. It's a centralized, it is a centralized human-centric platform which has a IDLE framework, which tells us that it provides you an ongoing ability or capability to like work on your data. So like you can see there is around circle in MAST methodology, which tells us that you can start from inventory. Like once you know what you wanna document, then you can go to the second step, which is D, documentation. You can document it in the registry. Then it comes to endorsement. Like if you know that your data is ready and it's documented and you want to get it reviewed by a registration authority, you want to give access to the public, then there's endorsement. Then the next step is audit and harmonization. You can do cleanups, you can remove the duplicates in that process. And then going forward, there's leadership, which like tells you that how you can give different permissions to different work groups, how people can interact with each other, how team collaboration can be done in the registry. And this is a continuous process. So that's how it provides you ongoing capability. It's a living system. You can start from any step at any time.
So one question that I've got is why is having these standards and frameworks useful for organizations who are trying to capture this data?
It's a standard. It's a standard that everybody in the government organization like follows. So like if there are different departments in government, everybody's gonna be aware of like all the 26 attributes. So it's easy to like do comparability across different organizations, I'll say.
So it's like just building that comparability.
Yes, and so that everybody's on the same page, and yeah, and everybody's aware of the terms that we are using. And like I'd also like to add, like Open Data Institute has one document on how to create a data inventory, which is a really good one. I'm going to share that in the chat. So give it a look whenever you get time.
We're also going to be sending out to everybody who's registered for today as well links to all of these resources. And one of the great things about these resources on the screen is they are completely platform independent. So these are things that we can start doing now to develop that good practice. We always like to kind of make sure that we've got some, something that we can take away. So there's a lot of really good work in those, and we'll be sending links and resources to those out. One of the other things that we'll be doing is we'll be sending through a video or a recording of our last webinar, because this kind of follows on from that last webinar where we were talking about setting up and customizing our inventories. But what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of move into that feature demonstration. So while I do this, or while we hand over to Shikar, who's getting this ready, I'll pause and I'll encourage everybody to kind of put questions in the chat as well. So if you've got any questions that you'd like us to answer throughout or towards the end about, how we've started to go through our IRAP process and ways that you can develop those data inventories internally, pop them in the chat and we'll make sure you've got access to those as well afterwards. But I think we're up to our feature demonstration. So
yes, let's do that. So I have shared a few links for the MAST methodology explanation. We do have some videos available on YouTube. Just give it a look. It's good to go through them. And then for this feature demonstration, I'm going to share my screen. Yep. Yeah, so in the last webinar, I remember like we discussed how to create data inventories, but in this one, we are going to see like how we can give access to different people, how it's helpful, why do we create data inventories, and where we can find them. So I'm on the homepage of the registry. Before we start the demo, like anybody has any idea, like why do we create data inventory views? Like what's the purpose of having data inventory views? Anybody? Sam?
I would say oh, good Lord. I think a big part of it is around just making sure that people have accessibility of this information. One of the things that is important from my perspective is, again, we're talking about centralizing this and giving access to people.
Yep.
One of the things that we did was we started with our Excel spreadsheets and again, for us, we can be quite agile in that, but as you get bigger, you want to have that permission. You want to give, access to certain assets to people. You want to give write access to certain people and view access to certain people as well.
Yep, that's correct. And in addition, we know that there are 26 attributes, and then we do add some custom fields as well for the data assets. So in total, let's say if there are 35 metadata attributes for one metadata item, it gets kind of messy. And what if I'm just interested to see let's say 5 details about a data asset? So that's why we can create data inventory views, which just provides me information about just the 5 things that I'm interested to look into. Let's see how we can do that. So we do have data inventory views at 2 different levels. One is registry-wide and the other is for stewardship organizations. So to look at the registry-wide, click on Browse. And then if you'll scroll down, you can see inventory view here. So if you click on this browse, this is available to all the users of the registry. Doesn't matter if they're a part of a stewardship organization or not. So if I'll click here, I can see a list of data inventory views here that talks about IRAP inventory, data assets and discovery and security compliance, and a few more. But we can see the name and definition or the description of the inventory views here with the stewardship organization. I am able to see all these inventory views from different stewardship organizations and a registry-wide one as well, because I'm an admin and I have access to all these stewardship organizations. But if I'm just a user, I'll just be able to see only this one, only the second one, because it's under no stewardship organization. So let's see how this data inventory view look like. So I'm just going to click on this. And I can see that this inventory view just gives me ID, name, definition, contact point, and authenticated user. Just 5 attributes for the data assets. If I want, I can filter it and I can sort it. If I click here, it's gonna sort it out for me. And this gives me the list of all the data assets with just the 5 things that I'm interested in. If I scroll down, I can see like there are 6 pages and there's a lot of data assets, let's say in hundreds. And if I want, I can see this edit button here. If I have access to edit this item, I can click on edit and I can just directly edit this. It depends upon if you have permissions to do so or not. And I can download these reports either in CSV or Excel file, and I can share them with my executives or with any user who even don't have access to the registry.
So this is basically helping us construct like a tailored view for, a particular use case.
Yes. So whatever you are interested in looking for, you can just extract that information instead of like looking at all the 30 attributes.
And would I see every asset in here, or is it based on,
You'll see all the assets, all the data assets, but you'll have the edit permission only for those that you have access to edit. If you don't have permission to view some content, you won't be able to see that here as well. So it's totally safe. It's like you'll only be able to see wherever you have access to. Yep.
And I guess like, so we've got this massive asset list. We've got this massive set of inventories. I think one of the things that a lot of people are going to be asking about as well is like, was it necessary for us to create all these one by one, or, kind of going back to our agenda, what are the ways we can do to kind of uplift this? Because a lot of organizations will have already started to go through this process of developing an inventory, capturing it in a centralized place, a centralized spreadsheet for a lot of places.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can bring that in quickly to really uplift that capability so that we can fill this out?
Definitely we can do that. Anyway, it doesn't make sense to like add and go like add one by one. Let's say if it's 1,000 of data assets, it will take you years to like document that. So there is a capability in the system to bulk upload those. So if you click on your name in the header, there is toolbox. So click on that. You can see this Aristotle bulk creator here. So if you click here, this is where you can do bulk uploads. So let's say I want to do bulk uploads for data sets. So I can just type in data set here. I can select it from the options below. And then I can, like, let's say I have a spreadsheet with 90 data sets that I'm going to show you now. But I want a certain set of people to have access to that. So I can create a work group. I can add, like, let's say all those 5 or 6 members in that work group. And only those 5 or 6 members will have access to the 90 data sets that I'm going to upload. So I can add it to a work group, let's say webinar work group for now. And then this page also gives me option to add custom fields. Custom fields are really helpful. Like we talked earlier that there are 26 metadata attributes that are like ID, name, description, modified date, who, the name of the person, when is it being updated, what's the frequency, etc. But what if like there's additional information about a data asset that you want to store? Let's say you want to store some information about help text, but ONDC attribute doesn't have a help text. So you can add custom fields so that you're not losing any content or any piece of information about your data asset.
So we'll talk about like, developing standards and having standards for this process. Like everything in Aristotle is based off our ISO standards that we know and love. But if there's specific things that my organization's looking at collecting, like details about where it's come from or who to talk to,
Yep.
or maybe like what section, these are the ways that I can kind of configure that.
Yes, we definitely love to follow the standard, and it is like it follows the standard. But then if you have additional information, you can add it. We want to make sure that you're not losing any content. So you can add custom fields in the template. And if you want to give alternate names or you want to include identifiers, you can select these. But let's download the template and see how it looks. So I'm just going to click on download. My template is downloaded, and this is how the template looks like. So I can see like all these ONDC attributes, like references, license, rights, frequency, contact points, and then these are the custom fields. So this is the template. The template really helps us to like document our data assets because it gives you clear understanding what you can record about your data. And you don't have to like document all the 26 attributes and all the custom fields at once. You can just start with name and definition. So this was the template, but I have a pre-filled template that I will be uploading. I have added some names and definition for the data sets, and then I have added some technical contact points and authenticated users here. So I have just filled 4 columns instead of like filling all the 35 attributes. And I can upload it. I'm just going to upload it from my laptop, and I'm going to drop it here. So I have dropped this file here. It's uploading. And I can see upload is completed. And if I scroll down, I can see there are 90 data sets. I can review it here and I can see the name, the definitions, the custom values that I have added. So I can review all the content that I want to upload before like doing the final saving metadata. And then I can click on the save metadata once I have reviewed it. And it's uploading. It's 90.
It's taking all of our information,
Yes.
taking our asset, and filling it into our.
Yeah. So it was 90 data sets with all the 4 information. And everything is done now. So you don't have to like go and manually create it. All the 90 data sets. If you expand this one, you will see all the names. So this is all being documented in the system now. You don't have to do manually anything.
Cool. So I've already got everything ready.
Yep.
I just upload it in and I can get it in. Now, you said that this is only accessible to my work group. So we've set up a team who's going to be doing a review of this content. But I think one of the things that's important for, these data inventories is, changing the visibility, changing the access to this data as well. Like what are our options in Aristotle for, for publishing this? Because some of these assets are public. They'll be, advertised through platforms like Tableon, where users can request this data as well. So what are the ways that we can, use the system to, inform internal or external users of the existence of our data? So there are 2 ways. One is like just directly, if you're sure that your content is good and you just want to make it public, you can just directly make it public. Let's see how to do that. So I'm going to go back to my workgroup that I have added this content to, which was webinar workgroup. So I can see it here as well. So it's showing me that there is 90 content in it, which we just uploaded. So I'll click on it, go to this metadata tab, and I can see all the 90 data sets that I have added here. I can select all at once, or I can just select a few. It depends upon what I want to do. So let's go to 1. I can see this is not endorsed or this is not public. Only the people in this webinar workgroup will be able to see this. But what if you want to make it public? You can just directly click on actions, click on this publication details. You can select who you want to make this visible to, like you want to make it public or just to authenticated user or a work group or a stewardship organization or a registration authority. I want to make it public. Let's say the publication date is from today. I want to publish it. And if you click on update publication details, that's it. It's published. It's so easy. So you can see it here. It is public from 1st February. So it is public now. So if you'll share this link with anyone, or if anybody goes to your registry, they'll be able to see this without having any login. So one way is this, and the other one is if I go back to this workgroup and I can see all other content here, right? The other way is to like get it endorsed with a proper process. A registration authority will review it. They can suggest you changes, you can keep on improving them, and then they're going to be registered by a registration authority. Let's say I'm going to do that for these 2, and I can click on bulk actions. There's this change registration status option. Just click on this. On this page, you can see the 2 items that you selected. The registration date is from today by default. If you want to change it, you can change it from here. And then it's asking you the cascade endorsement. Do you want to like ask or request a review for all the items that are linked to those 2, or you just want this individual items to be reviewed and endorsed? So I want to, let's say yes, that like I want all the items, all the child items that are linked to those 2 as well to be endorsed. And let's say I want to get it endorsed by Data Governance Registration Authority. So this is
This is the team that's going to look into my content and it's going to review content. And then what state I want. Let's say I want to make it standard. If I want, I can add any administrative note. Let's just click on review and apply status changes. And it's asking me to confirm. And we can see the details here. I'm okay with all these. I am just going to click on apply selected status. And that's it. The review has been created for those two. So if I'll go to so the registration authority team will get a notification that review has been created. And if they'll go to this review request, and if they'll find the reviews here,
I think we just created.
did we?
Yeah, we just read this.
Okay.
So I think but what we're seeing there is it's basically giving us a couple of alternate workflows and kind of work programs that we can use to make it available to users as well. So again, it's very permissions based. I think is one of the things that we wanted to kind of really make sure that people are aware of here, is because not only do we want this in a centralized location, one of the other things that's really important is making sure that users can access only the necessary information. And that, again, kind of bringing it back to the start of the program, was really talking about, we want to make sure that the right users know about data across the organization in the right ways. So again, whilst we might have brought this data inventory in and made it accessible to certain users, we haven't necessarily made it available to, made the actual data itself available. The other thing that we're seeing here is, again, it's around how are we endorsing and how are we publishing this information out. And again, I think the difference there is looking at, how we kind of building those internal standards, how are we making sure that we're going through those quality checks. I think the difference there is, we can publish content and say, this is publicly accessible. But I think that the area that we see people moving towards now is around building those data governance processes so that there is a quality control. Because I just these data inventories aren't just one or two fields or just a name and description. I think the MAST methodology tells us that we want people to start, we want to empower people, but the really key thing is are they capturing all the necessary information? And that's where our data governance teams can go back to our data inventory and use that as an opportunity to scan through and see, what's happening.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty much everything we had on the agenda for today. I think, so again, what we wanted to do was keep this really short and really self-contained. And the idea is that these data inventories, can we see the data inventory again?
Yes, we can.
These data inventories are designed to provide that high-level overview of data assets across the organization. The idea is that users can go through, they can scan this information, check for missing values, check for missing fields as part of that process. So the end result of this isn't just publishing a spreadsheet. It's how does this collection of information support the rest of the organization meeting those data governance goals? Because data really it's the beginning of that conversation. Once that inventory has been developed, how do users engage with it? How do they access it? How do they request it? Because we want to be using this data downstream in additional processes to make sure that we're using this asset to its fullest potential. So what I think we're going to do there is we're going to start pausing, because we have seen some questions come through, and I think we want to spend the last 10 minutes of the webinar really getting more questions from the rest of the audience or things that you'd like us to see covered. What I'll do is I'll answer. We see a question from online around how we use transformers for this. One of the answers is yes. So last year you would have seen we released some metadata harvesting capability to connect to external systems. We can do bulk uploads using the transformers through another mechanism, and I might get someone to follow up with you on that as well. So we can do those bulk uploads in a number of ways, but the process that we've shown today is designed really around those spreadsheets for users who are trying to capture that information as quickly as possible. Are there any other questions online around how we went through that IRAP process, why data inventories are important, or any of the things that we kind of went through with that demo?
Yeah, or any question about publishing or registration authority status? Any questions?
If you've got them, just pop them in the chat. While we wait for those questions to come through, one other really big piece of news is over February, You may have noticed that there's a lot of material now coming out from Aristotle from a content perspective. We've actually been collating our training for a while now, and by the end of February, we're actually going to be publishing our first online training, or sorry, our second online training module, focused specifically on data inventory development. So we're actually going through that ideal and master process, and we'll be building training modules around how to get the rest of the organization involved and what you can do to become, a really well-versed practitioner across all of the features around data set management in Aristotle. So later this month, we'll actually be releasing that to a key number of beta tester users. So if you're interested in being part of that process, follow the community forums, because that's where we'll be talking through that. And then we'll be letting everybody know once that becomes accessible, so that you can really get a deep understanding of everything that goes into data set management using the Aristotle Metadata Registry. Are there any other questions online? Or are we all generally happy? Like, if you really enjoyed this one, or if you think we've covered everything we said we were going to cover, throw a thumbs up as well, just so we know we've got everybody still here. Groovy. We covered everything.
Yep, that's good.
We've got a hand up there. I don't know if that's a question or a thumbs up. Let's see.
There's a question, I think. Oh, no.
No, disappeared. I think it's just a thumbs up.
Cool.
In that case, I think we've really covered everything that we intended to as part of this. As we said at the start, I think we said at the start, we've actually recorded this as well. So if you've missed anything in this, we'll be making this webinar available online as well. Or if you wanted to see any of this later, you can kind of go back and watch it. If you are watching online, all of the links that we sent through the chat, you'll also see somewhere down there in the comments section when we post this on YouTube. And we'll be sending out links directly to everybody as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out there. We'll close out there. And I just wanted to say again, thank you to everybody who's kind of joined in today. If there are any other questions, I strongly encourage you to go to community.aristotlemetadata.com.
Yep.
We're constantly monitoring there, constantly answering questions. And if you've got any other feedback or any other questions about how to use the platform, reach out to us at hello@AristotleMetadata, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So from me, thank you. And
yep, thank you everyone for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.
Yep, thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.